Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about this retrograde Mercury debilitated in the sign of Pisces, making a conjunction with Rahu North Node. And this conjunction will perfect on March 17th at 8 degrees of Pisces. Now, in the previous video, I examined the conjunction of Mars and Rahu at the same exact 8-degree mark. In that video, I talked about how power erupts externally because both Mars and Rahu are talking about forward and outward motion. It was about confrontation and raw assertion of power, the hunger for power. But we have to realize power doesn't just operate externally through our externalized actions. In fact, if we don't have some sort of a wiring of external powers inside of ourselves, we don't understand our social relations and dynamics. So those same power systems exist within us. And the conjunction of this Mercury in its retrograde motion is very much about this. It's describing the subtle forms of power. And I'm saying power because Rahu North Node has a lot to do with this concept. This conjunction is talking about when our thinking, our communication, and our relational instincts become intermingled with power dynamics, with the psychology of power. This conjunction is meant to reveal something to us that's quite uncomfortable, which is the way we change and adapt ourselves to our relationships, the way we smooth tension, disruptions, and all of it to maintain balance and harmony in those relationships, which can come at the cost of ourselves. It's showing us the way that we've been reshaped, remolded to be able to fit certain dynamics. And to understand this transit in general and the psychology that it's symbolizing, we're going to go through Mercury in Pisces, Rahu, and then talk about what the psychology is about. But before getting into the depth of this video, I want to let you know that there are a number of videos coming up, and I tie the transits together. I'm telling you the narrative of the sky and how that can help us self-explore, self-examine so that we understand our own unfolding, the process of our own life. And the next video that's going to be very much related to this is one of the most challenging conjunctions of 2026, which is that Sun-Saturn conjunction, where the Sun is also going to make a sextile to Pluto. And I'm going to tie this video when that video comes up. And there'll be other videos in between, and if you want to catch all of them, please do remember to subscribe and press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when those videos are released. And now, very briefly, let's go through the nature of Mercury so that we understand why these dynamics are happening. The first thing we have to keep in mind, Mercury represents our intellect. So it's talking about our thinking process. Mercury is also symbolizing our capacity to decipher and to interpret information. It comes to be about the way that we reason, we compare and contrast things, how we establish relational dynamic between different ideas or components. So it's the way that we decipher our experiences. It's through Mercury's deciphering that we understand our environments, the relationships within those environments. But Mercury has another essential role, which is about the way that we're able to establish connection with other people. It's the planet that mediates interaction between things, and that includes between people. For instance, Mercury represents friendships. And Mercury also represents diplomacy, tact, compromise, adaptability. Mercury is considered to be a democratic planet because it tries to maintain the equilibrium and balance between things. Mercury has very much to do with balance and symmetry. Both sides of a thing look the same, feel the same, have the same weight. And this adaptability of Mercury becomes something very important in our discussion today. And I just want to quickly take Mercury because it's debilitated through the sign of Pisces to understand why this debilitation occurs so that we understand the layers of our discussion today. First thing about Pisces, Pisces is this vast ocean without differentiation. Like you can't distinguish one droplet of water from another. It's just ocean. And the environment of Pisces is denoting depth. It's fluid. It's fluctuating. So it represents our emotion because of that water element. And it's a very highly sensitive environment or sign. Now, when we look at the mythologies of Mercury, right away we see some sort of a discrepancy here. Because in many ways, Mercury itself is the god of boundaries, or at least the god that can cross boundaries. In fact, Mercury is known as the planet of the twilight. He's the guy that can go and tread the distance between light and darkness. So this is telling us that Mercury, for Mercury to be functional, it needs boundaries, differentiation, and distinction of things. In fact, Mercury's job is always to name things. This is that, therefore it's not that. That's the job of the intellect. It differentiates, while Pisces wants to be a merged state. So this differentiation that Mercury needs is not present, is not part of the function of Pisces. In fact, Pisces operates through understanding things as an impression, as the totality of something where it makes an impression on you, not based on distinct parts. That's the function of Virgo, the opposing sign. This is one of the reasons why symbolically Mercury is debilitated in this sign. When Mercury comes here, instead of understanding how something's distinctly not something else, to be able to name it and label it, the intellect is forced to absorb tones of things, moods of things. It has to rely on feelings, which is not the strong suit of Mercury. But at its best, we're talking about a very imaginative placement. We're talking about intuitive perception that can become artistic, creative, poetic, because Mercury has to do with words. When you read a poetry, if you were to just read it for what it is, it doesn't really make sense, but it's evoking something within us. So the debilitation of Mercury is telling us our intellect is becoming less interested in defining reality in the way that is structured and the way the components of that structure are in relation with each other. And it's becoming more inclined to talk about how things feel. But let's just now bring Rahu here to introduce it as well, which I talk about Rahu extensively and itself as itself in the previous video. And I highly encourage you to watch that video, the conjunction of Rahu and Mars. And in that video, I was saying that Rahu North Node represents hunger. And in the sign of Pisces, it becomes about the kind of hunger and power that's related to the ideological aspects of life, the ideological power relations, which we're watching them play themselves out on the world stage right now. But in general, Rahu is about amplification, externalization, forward movement, future orientation. And Rahu wants power, it wants influence, and it's always looking for a strategic advantage. And in the last video, I was saying every time Rahu touches another planet, it can hijack that planet and it can amplify its qualities. And it can introduce instability and obsession in the system. So when Rahu touches Mercury, Rahu's entering the domain of thinking and the intellect. It's entering the domain of speech, interpretation, and negotiation, because these are the things Mercury represents. So this combination can start to produce massive fixation on ideas. Our minds can become captivated by narratives that promise advancement, recognition, or psychological leverage. Like in communication, this can appear as our power of persuasion. It can also express itself as exaggeration, manipulation through words, or strategic storytelling. But we have to remember we're in the sign of Pisces and things are a little bit more complex than that for Mercury. And that's because the mind is forced to function through emotional absorption rather than clear articulation. And considering Rahu has to do with power itself, and Mercury is talking about relational dynamics between things, and Rahu wants to hijack the functions of Mercury, even a debilitated Mercury. This conjunction comes up to be about the way that we've internalized power dynamics within us, within our intellect, within our mind. Rahu's going to show us some very uncomfortable things that have been wired in us. For instance, Mercury is the function, that drive, that wants to maintain relational balance, ways of being, the way this drive within us has been conditioned. This comes out as politeness, the way that we accommodate other people. And this desire that we have to keep our relationships intact and keep them smooth. And just by itself, this is an important thing. It's an important survival instinct, behavioral instinct that allows us to survive our social dynamics because it's allowing cooperation, communication in ways that other people can understand us. And these kind of things sustain our relationship without interruption or constant disruption of them. But Rahu represents hunger for power and influence. It wants to externalize this energy. It wants to push all expressions outward. And when it touches Mercury, it wants Mercury to use its speech and communication to be able to gain power, to assert its interpretations. But we're going to come to see, because Mercury especially is in this feely sign, that we can't do it. We come to realize there's too much at risk to do this. If we do this, if we do what Rahu wants us to do, we're going to jeopardize the harmony of our relationships. We're going to see our own mental hesitation that we cannot assert ourselves. We're going to see how we over-empathize with other people's needs and emotions. And that in itself is not a bad thing, but we're going to come to see how it's so problematic. We're going to become so conscious of this that we might make our language even a little bit softer. And it's going to create such a, for lack of a better word, icky feeling in us that we're forced to look at ourselves and reflect, to go inwards. This conjunction is going to force us to see our conditioning. We're going to learn how the mind has learned so quietly to adapt itself to the power structures around it that it cannot assert its own power. It's been subdued. And this is a good thing, because when we're born, all of us, we are born free. We are born as a kind of a potentiality. But everything about our socialization from the get-go is about modify yourself so that you can accommodate the other. And this is important because we're social beings and we're supposed to know how to do that. So we have to curtail our own power, but we do not have to contract out our power to feel safe, to feel secure, that we belong. But we have all gone through this conditioning. Like when you went to school, you were socialized, your instinct to be active, to be curious was beaten out of you. You sit in your seat. Even the teacher controls when you can relieve yourself. So power was constantly being exerted over you and you had to give your power to someone else. This has wired our brain in ways that we cannot even begin to comprehend what this has been doing or does in our life. This conjunction is bringing it to the surface. If you look back through your entire life, you have made so many small adjustments just to make others feel comfortable, just so you're not ostracized, just so that you have a sense of belonging. And I actually want us to think about this during this transit. How often do we refrain from expressing ourselves so that we don't create disagreement? How often do you silence yourself when confrontation's actually needed? What do you sacrifice to maintain relationship harmony? The way that you sacrifice and prioritize relationships over everything else. This conjunction is showing us how we refuse to use that Mercury function to name things, how we've been doing it historically through our biography. And because of it, we have not faced the uncomfortable truth of our lives, which is our relationship and social dynamics and the way they have their own power dynamic and power structure. And we have to realize on their own, in these small increments, they seem very minor. It's like, it's totally okay. I won't say that because it's not even a big deal. Let me just accommodate the moments. I just don't want to rock their boat and upset them. But we don't understand these small increments. For us, it adds up. This actually reorganizes the mind. And it's reorganizing it around maintaining relationships, even if they're toxic, rather than preserving clarity. And we have to realize over time, this transforms the way that we're able to see our own authority, our own power, and our own legitimacy. What Rahu is doing here, because it wants us to express, and we see that we can't, it's pushing these subconscious patterns into visibility. And that's because it's creating the impulse for us to express our power. But we feel like, oh my God, I'm going to be risking so much. But that urge is so strong that we have to now assess, why does this feel risky? So Rahu's showing us, dude, you've been playing nice for way too long. You have restrained yourself, repressed and oppressed yourself just to play nice. And all of it has been at the expense of losing your innate and inherent power that you can't even speak clearly, openly, and say what you mean. So this conjunction is allowing us to see the structures of power that we exist in, structures that were previously invisible to us because we were just being polite. We were just going along. We didn't want to rock the boat. And now here is Rahu. Rahu saying, say what you mean. Just say it out loud. You are in a position of authority and power in this dynamic. Why can't you talk? What you're saying actually has authority in this moment. What's wrong with you? And these are our own voice in our own head. Like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just tell this person that what they do really hurts me? I'm not going to play along with it anymore. So Rahu's shown us how we've been playing in systems and cooperating with systems that reward complacency. They require of us to be complacent, to comply, to obey, to submit. And once when we examine this, we're going to see so much of it has to do with self-preservation, to feel whole, that merged state of the Pisces, to feel unified, even though we're being fragmented at our core. So we're keeping the surface appearance of wholeness, but the subconscious underneath it is all fragmented. We'll see that we've been conditioned to see tension as something that threatens our safety and our security, where in reality, tension is the way to grow. Because if you're in a relationship dynamic, you and partner are in moments of tension and friction, why is it that we've come to interpret that as something that's going to break us? That can be something that strengthens us. When you go to the gym, your body's constantly under tension, so you're actually becoming stronger. And when you actually know how to live with this tension, you'll know when it's getting too far and it can bring things into its breaking point because you're comfortable being there. But we've been conditioned to see this tension as something threatening. So the mind has organized itself to maintain acceptance at any cost. And I want us to know the cost of this is very high because we end up living with resentment, contempt, anger, some of the most worst and toxic feelings. And I say toxic when they are ongoing in our lives. This conjunction with Rahu is bringing all of this out. And I was saying Rahu is about externalization of things. So Rahu's showing us our inadequacy when it comes to having personal power. And this has been a theme. If you've been watching the videos, we talked about similar themes with Saturn in the sign of Aries. I was talking about it with Mars conjunct Rahu. I'm going to talk about it because it's an ongoing narrative when we have Saturn and Sun come together again. But in this moment, Rahu is revealing how our mind is operating in a state of submission. Is showing us how our cooperation has become about excessive accommodation, where it requires us to sacrifice ourselves and our well-being. Like Mercury in the sign of Pisces can be silent, can be very quiet in some ways, or they can excessively talk. I've seen this too. It's just that the balance is lost somehow. But this Rahu is showing us that we cannot actually raise our voice. And I don't mean it in a screaming sense, in the sense of expressing our concern. We have become silent. So a lot of this conjunction is going to be about self-confrontation rather than confronting other people. So let's talk about some ways that these situations can unfold. Maybe externally triggered so that we go and internally reflect, or just we have these revelations and we're just sitting and thinking like, oh my God, what's happening? So we might face a situation that feels degrading, or a conversation that feels manipulative. Or we're just in a relationship that is fundamentally unbalanced. Not that it even feels like it, it just is. And any sane person who's well put together from inside out would not tolerate these situations. Because to tolerate such a situation is showing that the mind is working against itself. So this is a time where such things come up where we question our own perception, our own interpretation, our actual dynamics. And I want you to pay attention. Because some of the first instincts, because of the conditioning, can be something like, maybe my reaction is excessive. Maybe my interpretation is unfair. Maybe this discomfort that I'm feeling is due to the misunderstanding of the moment. But I want you to take this moment, take a step back, and try to see, is what you're saying true and accurate, or is this based on the previous conditioning of the mind? Are you assessing this properly, or are you coming to doubt the alarms, the dissonance that's coming online? I mean, like during this conjunction, just do an experiment. Take a moment to see like people that are at conflict with you, people that you know that they create dissonance in you. Why do you change your tone of voice when you're around them particularly? Like, what if you deviate from their expectations? So what? What if they disapprove of us? They don't like us? What if they set out to punish and to exclude? What's worth more, possessing your own power or submitting to people who want your submission? Because at the end of the day, such people will not show up for you when you're in need. It's important to remember that. Who do we care about? Like their opinion. We're trying not to rock their boat because eventually they will be there for you. Not really. People who require of you to make yourself small, rest assured they want you small and powerless so that you become dependent on them. And they will not show up because now that is their leverage. So this is why it's worth sitting around and thinking, well, what if they don't like me? This is a time right now to see how we have become agreeable, where we should actually be disagreeable in some ways. Rahu's giving us the permits, even in the sign of Pisces. Rahu wants us to see that you don't need to shrink to survive. You're actually on the border of surviving and not thriving because you keep shrinking yourself. You think you're maintaining your dignity by surrendering your authority, but in reality, when you surrender your authority where you do have authority, you don't have dignity. So these are the things, the complicated, complex things that the mind's grappling with. Rahu's bringing these contradictions out in the open, magnifying them and amplifying them. And that's because Rahu has an objective. It wants to express itself externally, outwardly, very far, powerfully, forcefully. But it's getting frustrated with Mercury because this Mercury keeps shrinking. So what Rahu's doing relative to Mercury's position, it's bringing all of these things to the forefront. And I want us to notice something very important when we get to these modes, when we think about these kinds of topics and when they come to the forefront. Yes, the outside world has conditioned us, but so many times we become the agents who repress ourselves. We take on that work for other people. It's like we conspire in this repression project with them. At some point, we're like, okay, don't lash back. It's okay. You don't have to repress me. I'll just repress myself. And these things become conditioned on us. Like we do conspire to enforce other people's expectations on ourselves. We preemptively soften our own disagreements before anyone else disagrees with us. So many times we silence our own understanding before anyone else gets to do it. And then we wonder, why do I feel like I'm depressed? Why do I feel so much anger, rage, and resentment? Yes, they've been doing it, but we've been doing it to ourselves too. This conjunction is making the feeling of it, having an explicit feeling about it, undeniable. We're beginning to see how we were silently socialized, how we contracted our own authority and power out to other people, and how we got so apt at policing ourselves in terms of silencing ourselves just to remain acceptable in our social dynamics. Like this confrontation that Rahu's bringing forward, the discrepancy that is showing us. The best that we can do with this is like, I don't want to erase myself anymore because I see it. I'm not going to constantly omit things of my own truth, silence myself to protect the expected stability of this group dynamic, this family dynamic, or this friendship. This conjunction is letting us see the structures of our own repression. And as difficult as this combination is, there is a blessing in it, which is us understanding how we give our power and authority to other people. And now, because we see and feel that, what do we need to do not to do that anymore? And before closing this video, I do want to say this. A lot of times, especially in the sign of Pisces, the way that we give our power to other people, like in all the ways that I explained, yes, but also we project onto other people qualities that should inherently be something that we possess. Like we'll look at another person, and this person, like if you get into the depth of their personality, how they generally behave and function, they are not the kind of quality that we're attributing to them. Suddenly they're the savior, they're the smartest person in the room. You are so funny, you are so caring and kind. And the person actually is not, but we're projecting these qualities that are actually our own quality, something that we can't take ownership of it because we don't feel our own power and authority to be that kind of a person. We project it and designate those qualities to someone else to play those roles. It's almost like we're going out in the world casting a person for these qualities that we should embody and enact. And we're telling them, hey, you're this. Can you do it on my behalf? This is another way of giving our power away, especially in the sign of Pisces, because Pisces can blur the line between what's real and what's fantasy. It's a sign that's very much related to projections. So I just want us to keep in mind, why is it that other people are falling short in our life and we feel powerless somehow because they're falling short? Is because we're projecting certain attributes to them to perform those things where it's our job to do those things. That's a way of reclaiming our power and not handing it over to someone else. And we could very well be just giving them excessive power that doesn't belong to them. They should not have it. Or we're setting them up for failure because that's not even what they're supposed to do. So these are very important points to keep in mind. And before closing this video, please do remember to subscribe, share, and like. And please do comment. I'd love to know how you have been dealing with such topics, and we all do it. Because as I said earlier, we've all been subject to contracting out our power and potential to other people from day one of life. We've learned coping mechanisms and ways of cooperation that later on in life come to work against us. I mean, they might have been some things that worked for us earlier in life, but later in life, they actually work against us, and they're things that we have to change. I'd love to hear you guys' story and how you navigate and negotiate and wrestle with such things. And of course, if you want a reading of this transit or just to understand your own birth charts, the narrative, the purpose of life, why you've gone through what you've gone through, what all of it means and how you can move forward, you can go to my website for more information on how to get this reading at parisayazi.com. I also have my email in the description box below if you want to directly contact me. And on my website, with most of the videos, I upload an accommodating article where I also include some self-inventory questions so we can sit and reflect, meditate, and contemplate the symbols in astrology, these drives within us, and how they're unfolding. Again, for that, you can go to parisayazi.com. And now to close. As I said earlier, this Mercury retrograde and this conjunction is not occurring in isolation. I want us to realize in the year 2026, Mercury's retrograde cycles, all of them fall into all of the water signs. So we're going to have one in Pisces, in Cancer, and in Scorpio. And this sequence is super meaningful. And it's meaningful not just because it's in water signs, it's because it's the only functional, amplified, watery aspect of this year, while all the other planets are moving into fire signs and air signs. And we have to understand water is saying something about our inner life. They're related to our memories, our emotions, the way that we've been subconsciously wired and configured. It has to do with the way that we attach to things or attachment styles. They're related to the invisible structures of our lives. And these are the structures that actually hold our lives together, the narrative that we have, the understanding that we have, the feelings of resonance and dissonance that we cannot even explain. It's held in these inner structures, which is related to the water signs. And considering that Mercury is starting its first retrograde in the sign of Pisces, it's saying that this process is starting at the deepest layer of our psyche, because the sign of Pisces has a lot to do with our subconscious realm. And Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It's a place where all the boundaries dissolve, all the forms, their structures, their separations dissolve and merge together as a sense of oneness. So it can talk about what's been accumulated beneath the surface. It wants to understand the essence of something, not just its appearance. It wants us to see what is the contents of our subconscious mind. So with this first retrograde, we're starting from bottom up. We're starting at a place where our intellect is most powerless, that debilitation of Mercury in the sign of Pisces. So we're kind of defenseless. Without our defenses, sometimes it's the only way to see the truth, to go deep, to have the depth emerge to the top, and without us having this defense mechanism to constantly push it down. And think about it, Mercury has had to deal with all the power planets in the sign of Pisces since it's been there. So it's met up with Sun, Mars, and now with Rahu. So all of these planets have been putting a lot of pressure on Mercury, that Mercury drive within us, meaning our thinking process and our perception. So this first retrograde of Mercury in Pisces is not about immediate correction. It's trying to help us to expose what's underneath everything and is generally hidden. It's showing us how the mind has gone through a lifetime of training, which is now what we call our subconscious patterns, our automatic patterns of behavior or reactions. And the subconscious mind truly does control the conscious mind, even though we like to think about it the other way around. This retrograde of Mercury is showing the things that have become our patterns and patterns that have quietly shaped the way we think, therefore the way that we experience life and how we experience and understand ourselves. It's showing us why we speak the way that we speak. Why do we position ourselves the way that we do in our relational dynamics, how we deal with power. It's showing us, specifically this Mercury and Pisces, where do we learn to soften our voice? Why do we do this? The agents of our lives that taught us to be agreeable. Why do we need to be agreeable? What was the function of that? We're getting to see why we have made ourselves palatable just to exist in the world. And how's that working for us? And will we really be as unsafe as we think we would be if we were to have a more authentic and truer expression of who we are, how we're like, what we're like? And of course, all of these kinds of adjustments take a long time. So having a realization about something doesn't mean you changed. And I think that's why all the Mercury retrogrades in the water signs are important, because they're taking us on a journey. We're making adjustments gradually. Gradually, we're saying not only how we were shaped, how these patterns developed gradually, but also how they no longer serve us. And because of that, what is now required to reshape them to something else? Like if you are an adult past the age of, let's say, 40, even 30, you're going to see that it doesn't serve you to shrink yourself. We don't have to give up our authority so that other people can digest us. But then again, how not to do this arrogantly? There's a fine line. So we're learning all of this because we're getting to see it and to feel it. And going back to the last sign of the zodiac, which is Pisces, Pisces has a lot to do with dissolution again. And these are patterns that have been solidified in us. So to start here, we have to dissolve some of these patterns, begin the process of it. That's what it's indicating. And then when Mercury starts its retrograde in the sign of Cancer, we'll see that our attention's being now pulled to our inner life, not the inner subconscious, the heaviness and the expansiveness of this subconscious realm, but it's more towards the hearts. It's taking us into that place. We're going to understand how the ways that we've adapted throughout the years, how it's shaped our inner landscape, our hearts, our level of empathy, our level of care. It becomes more personal. The sign of Pisces can have an impersonal feeling. Cancer is very personal. So it's going to talk about habits, feelings, attachment, emotional protection. Those are the things that we're going to review with that retrograde. And finally, when Mercury retrogrades in the sign of Scorpio, we're going to examine the hidden mechanism of power, which has a lot to do with the things that we fear in this life, our dependencies, how control operates beneath the surface of things, where we can't have an independent expression of ourselves. Mercury's final retrograde is going to be about how do I reclaim it. And that last sign is not about recognition anymore. It's about transformation. But transformation cannot occur until we have a view of what it is that we need to transform. And we're in it now. We're becoming aware. And this is why this first retrograde matters a lot, because it's bringing us to the depth of these patterns. It's bringing us to the realm of subtle negotiation. So subtle and yet so powerful because it's been going on for a lifetime. It has reshaped our mind and our thinking process, where accommodation of other people at our own expense is just automatic. It's subconscious. It just happens without us even noticing that we're doing it. With Rahu, that friction that is bringing as a contrast, we're getting to see it. Those invisible patterns are becoming visible. And I'd like to end this video with a wish for us. And my wish for this transit is that we see clearly where our mind has learned to negotiate with power by shrinking ourselves. And I hope that this awareness becomes the beginning of the end of those patterns. I hope that we become the kind of beings that will never ask another person to become small and to shrink or to relinquish their power so that we feel our own. I hope that we are so powerful and strong within us that we can stand with another's power and interact, have relationships, connections, and friendships on that premise. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.